In a new age world filled with delusions and wish fulfillment by morons in need of attention, renowned experiencers of high strangeness and podcasters Jeffrey Ritzman and Jeremy Vaeni received invitations to a tropical paradise getaway called Paratopia. Little did they know, it was the same type of new age spiritual retreat they've been avoiding all their lives.
Oh, don't be shy.
Guess what the atmosphere of Uranus is made of, swamp gas.
Come on, you can shake it.
Yeah. Hudson Valley has more sightings of Black Triangle than a 70s porn.
Anything goes at Paratopia. And welcome.
You're listening to Jeff and Jeremy's Paratopia on 105.3 UPRN, New Orleans. Unless you're listening to 105.3 UPRN, New Orleans, in which case, you're not hearing this show at all. So why do we have to keep saying this? Why do we have to do it week in and week out? Plug a radio station that we're not even on. Somebody ask Joe Montaldo.
Please welcome Paratopia, our very special guest, the author of Interdimensional Universe, the author of many more books, but this is his latest. Phil Imbrogno, thank you for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure.
There's so much in this book that we could do. It's great because you have all of these sort of classic cases, but you've added your own bonus material from your own files and from Alan Hynek's files, which you've adopted. I know you worked closely with him, and he left you some files. So we could do all that, like, specific individual stuff, but really what I would love to do is tell a story, Phil. I'd like to tell a story. And the story I want to tell starts with you inventing a way to monitor the Earth by stealing satellite feeds. And you actually give instruction in your book on how to do this for people.
Yeah.
Tell us, give us the setup of this.
Yeah, well, back in 1992, I realized that there was quite a bit of satellite transmissions to the Earth. And I figured, come on, these things are imaging the Earth from as far as 25,000 miles in space. Now, this was a time when there was really not much of an internet. There wasn't really much of satellite reception in anything. Of course, now today it's a different story. So I just figured, you got all these transmissions coming from space. I mean, wouldn't it be interesting to intercept them and decode them and get pictures of the Earth, and who knows what might be there? So I got a receiver, and, I designed a system and started picking up the satellite transmissions. And you pick them up in the VHF band, about 137 megahertz, and then you can pick them up at about 2 gigahertz or so. But the thing is that, they're tones, they're coded. So you have to get a program and a demodulator to identify the tones with black and white images, or ones and zeros. So the tones actually represent ones and zeros. And so you get the demodulator, and it turns the tones into computer codes, and the program decodes it, and you get a picture of the Earth from space. And I was receiving hundreds and hundreds of pictures from polar orbiting satellites and satellites in geosynchronous orbit. Most of them were scientific satellites, but also I got pictures from military satellites also, which showed resolution right up down to, cars going on the highways. Mm-hmm. And I figured, one day I'm looking at these things, and there's an image under the satellite, a triangular-shaped object. I'm saying, what the heck is that, I figured it was some type of missing data, missing flaw, or something like that. And then, a couple hundred images later, I get another one. And then, I'm saying, this is kind of strange. Then I got a picture of a disk outside the Earth, a dark disk in infrared. And then I got another disk with layers around it. It looks like portals or windows. And these were taken by the GOES 8 satellite. And then I got another image from a NOAA 12 satellite, which is a polar orbiter, which orbits at pretty low altitude. It was passing over an object, a cylindrical-shaped object, which had markings on it. And obviously metallic looking with bands on it, with marking on it. And the thing is that later on, like a stupid person, I sent these pictures to NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, the government's, weather service and keeping track of the satellites. And they had no idea they had these images on film and on image in their file. So they took them out and they said, we don't know what they are. We call them artifacts. And if there's anything in the images like that, the computer automatically rejects it because we don't use it for weather forecasting. And they said, well, they're not interested. Well, I call again, and obviously they're analyzing the pictures, and they're trying to tell me that the images are of the moon. And I'm saying, this is an infrared photograph. Look at the background space. This is a disk. And look at the background space. And it's clear because it's infrared. There's no heat. But look at this object. It's glowing black, which means it's very, very hot. I said, how could that be the moon? The moon is not an infrared source. Mm-hmm. So I get a letter from NOAA and from a person who identifies himself as the director of anomaly analysis. Now I'm saying to myself, well, if they didn't care about these anomalies, why do they have a whole office that dedicates to studying these things that are picked up on satellite? And so then I get another long letter from a NOAA scientist who's saying, it wasn't the moon, and that NOAA has been picking up unidentified objects with their satellites since they put them in orbit, and that they're still picking them up today. Now, there was a lot of going back and forth and a lot of calls I received from various individuals from NOAA, and the bottom line is that shortly after that I made those photographs public, NOAA changed the decoding on their satellites. So every once in a while you would see a picture of the Earth, and then all of a sudden the next frame would say, blocked or channeled out or go to decoding number so-and-so and so-and-so, which you don't know what it is. It's their own code. And they started blocking out pictures. And they didn't start doing that until I made these pictures public. But anyway, in 1992, because of this new technique of receiving satellites, I wrote a paper for a very respectable geological magazine at the time called Earth. And they published the paper, and it went over really big. However, the United States government didn't care for it too much. But there was nothing they can do about it because theoretically, the satellites that I was tapping into officially were used for scientific purposes, which means that they're public domain. Mm-hmm. But the thing is that, you got to know how to access these things. Nowadays, you see, the coding on the satellites has changed considerably, even though you can still pick them up and still decode them. However, you have to be careful because they're scrutinizing all the images now. And much of these satellite images now you can pick up on the Internet, but, of course, they're edited, and the only images that are available on the Internet are the ones that, the government in this particular organization wants you to have. Mm-hmm. So, they have been picking up UFOs around the Earth for a long time on these satellites.
Okay, and so what you're seeing is these objects are in the infrared spectrum, right?
Well, they're prominent in the infrared spectrum. The thing is that the images come in one after another. So the object is there in one frame, and then it moved in another frame, and then it's gone, which means that it's moving. But in the infrared, you see, what you can do with the computer is that you could colorize these images and give them colors association for how hot they are. And the center, towards the center of the object, is very hot, and as it goes to the edges, it starts to get cooler, as it should be. And whatever it is, it's giving off quite a bit of energy, which is in the form of, heat or microwaves or, red visible light, but mostly I would say infrared and probably some microwaves, but they're very hot objects.
Mm-hmm. So in my non-scientific mind, I see that these are visible in the infrared, and I immediately think, oh, well, gee, doesn't ghost hunters look for ghosts in the infrared? Is that a link that I should not be making because I don't know what I'm talking about?
You know what? Infrared just means heat. It's giving off energy and heat. A human body would show up an infrared film or infrared detector very, very strong. And, ghost hunters with paranormal phenomena, that's one thing. Everybody tries to use infrared, but my idea is that, and I've had some success with it, is using UV. And I've also designed some filters, which I put together up at MIT. And these are what are called interference filters, and they block out most of the other types of electromagnetic radiation and just let in a very narrow band of a part of the spectrum towards the UV. And so far, preliminary results, you have to adapt into a camera. That's a problem, too. With the digital stuff, that's not very good. But it's picking up things in the UV that are around us that, we normally can't see. And, what I usually say is that, with today's technology, the technology is out there to make a detailed study of the paranormal. The technology that's available just has to be modified because it wasn't built for that purpose, but it can be used to study the paranormal. The problem is that the so-called paranormal investigators out there, UFO investigators, they have no idea how to use this equipment. So, you get all kinds of crazy results, and they're not using this type of equipment. And they're still using the old infrared stuff and, these little handheld magnetometers and temperature gauge things. All that equipment, that's not even accurate. It's all junk. And so when you talk about, TV paranormal investigators, most of the time everything's scripted anyway, so they're not really discovering or finding anything, or not even using the equipment properly.
One of the things that you sort of end that section of the book on is a letter that you got from someone who said, hey, one of those objects, a cylinder that has some strange markings on it, what was it, the CIA he worked for, saw that too?
Yeah, they pulled it out of their files, and it was a person who was an imaging scientist at NOAA, and the thing is that CIA representatives came in and took most of those images out of NOAA and put a national security classification on them. The thing is that the CIA piggybacks cameras on these satellites for spying. They're not supposed to, because these are primarily scientific satellites. But if you want to hide some type of surveillance satellite, you hide it with a weather satellite. So when it passes over your country, you can say, to the Chinese or the Russians, oh, don't worry, that's just a weather satellite passing over your country. And I'm there as a another camera that's high resolution, which is operated by the NSA, and another one by the CIA, which transmits at a different frequency, which is actually used for spying. And it's these high resolution cameras that are also picking up some pretty unusual stuff around our planet, and it's quite interesting.
Mm-hmm. And you also say in the book that you still have some from back in the day of your military service, friends who are active in the CIA and are sort of, pretty prominent there. Do you get the sense from them or from any of these letters that you have received that you find credible, do you get the sense that they know more than they're saying about this stuff, or that they know less than we think they know about all of this stuff?
It depends upon who you talk to, because the people who deal with, I think, the paranormal in the government and the UFOs, it's a very narrow, it's a very small group. In other words, it could be attached to the CIA, the NSA, it could be even another secret organization, but whoever they are, it's a very small group with a need-to-know basis, and they don't share information with the military and so on a regular basis. I don't think they have to. Yes, I do have a close friend in the CIA, and, we served in the military together. I got out, and he stayed in, and the result is, he became a company man in the CIA. And, he called me up one time and said, when I was investigating the sightings in the Hudson Valley, and I discovered these underground passages and tunnels underground where, people have been seeing strange-looking entities and beings coming out of, and military activity and so on. He called me up and said, back away from this one.
Well,
and
that's where we were going next. So let's get into that, because I found it interesting that Hynek, toward the end of, I guess his life, he said that he really didn't think that this was nuts and bolts craft from another planet, that you should look closer to home, that it was perhaps interdimensional, and that you specifically should look at the Hudson Valley, since there seemed to be a bunch of activity going on around there, and that's what got you interested. I didn't realize that's what got you sort of hooked on the stone chambers and making all those discoveries, was Hynek's suggestion?
Yeah, well, it was very cryptic. What he said, it's as if he was trying to tell me something in a direction to look without giving me, a great deal of information. And he said primarily, look for windows. And he said that he would be very disappointed if UFOs turned out to be nothing more than somebody else's spaceships from another star system. He said he believed that the answer was more exotic than that. Well, I did a lot of research in the area, and I did a lot of research. One of the great advantages I had, as a scientist, is that studying the UFO phenomena. When you study the UFO phenomena, you study a great variety of paranormal phenomena. One of the problems that so-called UFO investigators have, one of their shortcomings, is that they're looking for tales of spaceships and aliens or so on, and they isolate themselves into that belief, and they're like, horses walking with blinders on the side, is that they're not seeing the entire picture. They're rejecting other types of cases that are associated with UFOs, other types of paranormal phenomena, which are attached to the UFO phenomena. And this stuff is all dimensional stuff. And one of the advantages, like I said, I had in the Hudson Valley is that, I had all of these strange going-ons, UFOs, apparitions, electromagnetic phenomena, sightings of strange creatures, and abduction reports, and close encounters of every kind, right in my backyard. So here was a laboratory, that I could study this material and analyze the data, and I have been for years, and I still am. And when Dr. Hynek said to me, well, look for windows, I was able actually finally to plot all this information on a very large map And I noticed that with the paranormal phenomena and the UFO stuff, that there were actual points. And these points were emanation points or centering point or whatever you want to call them. And when I went out to these areas, I always found one of these stone structures. And it seems that somebody was building these stone structures to mark this area as being something strange. And that leads into a whole other area of research, because the stone structures are lost in time. Nobody really knows who built them. There's evidence now through my research and the research that others are doing that these structures were built thousands of years ago, and they're not randomly placed. Today, they're built over areas of intense negative magnetic anomalies. So here we see these stone structures, which are very old, built by a race who knows really who they were. They're built over these areas of intense negative magnetic anomalies. There's legends of these locations of strange phenomena, and today we're still seeing strange phenomena reported in these areas, including UFO sightings. So I believe that there are these multiple nodes or dimensional windows around the world that open up for some various reason. I don't know if it's a natural thing or somebody on the other side has control over opening and closing these Dr. Hynek's so-called windows.
Mm-hmm. Well, you had started mentioning the underground tunnels, and in the book you talk about these underground mines, and that you had discovered that some of them, it seems as though some sort of modern technology has picked off where the old 1800s technology left off, or picked up where it left off.
Oh, yeah.
How did you determine that, and what was the
result?
Result?
Yeah, well, it all started when I saw an article in the New York Post. And in the New York Post, somebody was saying with all of these UFO sightings that they were seeing government vehicles going into the back roads where the old abandoned mines are. Nobody really knows where the mine entrances were. And that intrigued me to investigate further. And, well, to make a very long story short, visits to the historical societies and looking up the old mining journals and just surveying the countryside. And I finally found, many of these mine entrances that lead underground. And one of them is called the Croton Magnetic Mine and the Brewster Mine in Brewster, New York. And one thing that's interesting is that the entire downtown Brewster is catacombed by underground passages, and some of them lead up to the basements of some of the old houses. And that this catacomb, this network of underground tunnels, goes down as far as 300 feet below the ground. There's a first level that's 75, another level 150, and another level that's 300 feet below the ground. Very mysterious. Well, studying the old mining journals, and I finally went into many of these mines and explored them and charted them. The first one to be in there in 100 years. Very dangerous, very spooky. And from the old mining journals, I found the tunnels, and then I found new tunnels which seemed to have been cut with more modern equipment. These new tunnels were not listed in the mining journals of the early 1900s and the late 1800s, and it seems that I believe that at one time someone was using these underground tunnels, probably the military or a member of the government, and that by the time I got in there, they had vacated the place and moved out because some of the tunnels went into dead ends where you can see that the ceilings and the walls were purposely collapsed to seal them, and that the tunnels were now flooding with water. So I have other evidence that these were being used at one time. I had seen people operating in and out of the entrances when I was surveying them back in the late 1990s. But it's very mysterious because of my friend, my associate, who, by the way, who in the CIA, who actually used to work for me when I was in the military. He called me. I asked him about the underground tunnels, and he said that he had seen request forms for equipment and biological containment equipment to be sent somewhere into the Brewster area. And then we got into UFOs and something like that. Then he called me back and said, of course, back away from this one. But I believe that there was some type of operation there while the UFO sightings were going on, and that if it was the United States government, people had seen helicopters and military in the area, that they pulled out somewhere around 1999.
Mm-hmm. So I guess sort of putting this all together, if it's even possible, do you get the impression that one, well, I guess this one's sort of the gimme, which is that someone in the government actually does care about this stuff, even though publicly they claim not to, but that two, they have backed off the nuts and bolts things from another planet, and they are sort of either certain or looking in the direction of interdimensional channels or windows?
Well, to answer your question, I know for a fact that the government, the military and members of the government do care about UFOs. I've had enough contact with them. Matter of fact, I'm the only civilian UFO investigator that was directly contacted by the Air Force since Project Blue Book closed. And the way I was being interrogated as to the content of my book Night Siege, the Hudson Valley UFO sightings, before it was published, you can tell that there was an interest. But the major I was talking to was obviously just collecting information for somebody else of higher rank. There's no doubt about that, because you can tell he had a job to do. He was going through a list of questions for me. And the thing is that, okay, the Air Force claims that they don't exist. There's no threat to national security. So when the sightings took place in the Hudson Valley, they became very concerned. And he admitted that the Air Force was very concerned about these sightings, that they did not know what they were. They obviously were studying them. If they weren't, why call me? So, and also I had a lot of interference with government agencies because of the sightings over the Indian Point nuclear reactor in Buchanan, New York in 1984. And that caused quite a stir. And I had letters and phone calls and visits by government people, because there are security guards out there who are ex-military and military and an ex-New York State police officer. They stood right under this object that they said was the size of 2 football fields over the only working reactor. And they wanted to know what I was told. And there was a security clampdown on the information that went out. And that was, the second time. One time directly, when I had a video of the UFO, a person from the National Security Agency, wanted the video, and I said no, and he said, Phil, the government has done away with people for less. Mm-hmm. I mean, so there's this interest out there, and I could give you more examples of over the years, for some reason or another, that I've had contact with people in the government, in the military, regarding my investigation into the UFO phenomena. And yes, there seems to be an idea or something in the government that these things are dimensional, at least some of them are, and that they're trying to obtain the technology from this intelligence.
Just, I guess, one more question before I hand off to my partner in crime here, and it's sort of a sidebar thing, just because you're so synonymous with the Hudson Valley UFOs. Of course, the latest debunking, or trying to debunk it, is the group of guys who came out and said, yeah, they were just flying some personal planes in a formation, and they hoaxed everybody. Do you know those people? Did they ever come forward with that then?
You know what?
Or is it all new?
You know what? That's not new. That's happened after the UFO sightings. Obviously, planes appeared in the area, and they were trying to imitate the UFO. So people who didn't see the UFO looked at it and said, that's one of what people must be seeing. People who saw the UFO then saw the plane saying, this is not what I saw. But the bottom line here is this, and I finally released the information in my new book, is that during the investigation, there were two groups of pilots. One were just amateur pilots who flew in loose formation. They really didn't fool anybody. Then there were a second group of pilots that were military, and they were flying Cessna O2s, which is used by the CIA for surveillance. They're very quiet, computer-run type of aircraft. This pilot called me, and he told me that they were instructed to fly around the Hudson Valley all the way up to Cape Cod, then back again, and they were flying unconventional aircraft with unconventional lighting, and they weren't given a purpose as to why they were doing this, but this particular person was a CIA operative. He was also a captain in American Airlines. So that's the first thing, but, they didn't start flying until well after the UFOs were spotted. So it seemed that there was some type of operation to contain the situation, which they did nicely. But the bottom line is that we have a clear video from July 24th, 1984, of the UFO in Brewster, New York, 15 minutes before it appeared over the Indian Point nuclear reactor in Buchanan, New York. Now, that videotape, through an associate, was sent to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, the most anti-UFO organization in the world. At the time, Dr. Lou Allen was the director of JPL. Dr. Lou Allen is also one of the names that's loosely associated with all of this MJ-12 stuff. Anyway, a friend of Lou Allen's, the doctor, the director of JPL, arranged for him to look at the tape and his imaging scientists. And I have a letter that was sent to his friend concerning the tape, saying they looked at the tape, and it was their opinion, and from their analysis, that the lights in the video represented one rigid object, not individual objects. That's all we wanted to know. We didn't want to know if it was a spaceship. We wanted to know if the lights represented one rigid object or individual objects. If it was individual objects, we can say that the sightings could have been planes. If it was one rigid object, that would rule out the plane theory completely. And JPL, the most anti-UFO organization in the world with the top imaging scientists, came back with their conclusions that the object in the video was one rigid object. Quote.
Jeff?
Well, I get a little creeped out when we start talking about the Hudson Valley, because many years ago, with my first research partner, I went to Pine Bush, New York, and I've actually written Phil about the things we saw up there, but I don't think I've ever mentioned it on the show. But Phil, one of the things that I remember was sitting at the McDonald's on the main drag, right next to
exactly where it is,
right next to Searsville Road, and I just want to go through each of the things that we saw or felt there, and I'd just like you to comment a little bit on each of these things. Number one would be upon the night that we got there, we actually stayed for an entire 24 to 36 hour period, as I remember it. We were sitting on the edge of the McDonald's parking lot, and there was a fence that basically bordered, I guess what at the time was just an open field with some pines here and there. And we saw a lemur on the fence. I mean, this was clearly a lemur, which has no bearing on something living in New York, but kind of fits in line with other stories that we had heard at the time of animals that don't seem to belong to the area showing up there.
Oh, yeah.
Can you give me anything on that? Because that was a very weird initial sighting that we had there that really just struck us incredibly strange.
Yeah, I don't really know the cause of it, but if you talk about that, there are these dimensional creatures, and they do pop in from these other realities. For example, if you're on the east side of the Hudson or the west side of the Hudson, which is the Hudson River Valley and Pine Bush in that area, Ellenville also was the scene of, massive UFO sightings and a lot of paranormal phenomena. And on both sides we're getting, sightings of strange creatures. And even like Bigfoot-like creatures, which is very bizarre. I mean, so that this is going on, it's not surprising, because I believe that these UFOs that we're seeing here actually come from a parallel reality, a parallel dimension. When they open up that window, they may also bring in something else with them. And it's all very strange, and it needs to be studied in greater detail. But so many people have had incredible encounters out in that area that it's a phenomenal thing. And too bad, there's not a bunch of experts going out there with unlimited funding to really solve the problem as to what's really going on.
What do you think is the absolute fascination with Searsville Road? I know that, and I'm sure you're familiar with Ellen Crystal.
Oh yeah, I knew Ellen very well.
And Bruce Cornett, who is another name that's almost synonymous, at least in my mind, for the Pine Bush information. Mm-hmm. I haven't had the most pleasant interactions with Bruce, but he certainly has been a mainstay of someone investigating that whole area. I think the other thing that I wanted to mention to you was going back Searsville Road. I would say it was, if I'm remembering correctly, you go out from the McDonald's, make a left, and down the road on your right-hand side is the Jewish cemetery.
Right. Yeah.
Before you hit that, is it possible to make a left onto Searsville Road heading in that same direction?
I believe it is, yes.
Okay. I think we went back that direction, and this was during daylight hours. I would say this is anywhere between 3 and 5 o'clock. I actually shot video of an Army helicopter dropping out soldiers into a field.
That's amazing.
What is that all about?
You know what? Yeah, you know what? I'm glad. I was just thinking about that. That's amazing. I had reports from people. They got knocks on the door, and there were soldiers, and they were saying people in a particular area to stay inside your house. And they looked out their windows, and they saw helicopters coming down, and the fields in area there were soldiers coming out there, and they were told that it was some type of practice operation. Now, the thing is that if you're going to do a practice operation, come on, you don't do it in a populated area like that and interfere with people. But they even saw people parachuting down, and the military cut off the entire area. And this happened more than once. Now, what is going on? Well, from my sources, and from what I found out, is that the military is currently engaged in trying to capture one of these dimensional beings that has the ability to move in and out of our dimension by some type of technology. They were hoping to capture this being to take the technology from them. It's almost like a scene from the movie Predator, with Danny Glover, Predator 2. And this has happened on more than one occasion. And so this is what you may have seen, but it's an amazing story.
I mean, I know that was private land because clearly there was a driveway going back to a farmhouse. This was someone's farmhouse area.
Oh, yeah.
And we immediately stopped the car. However, I didn't want to hang around too awfully long. That was back in the days of having a full-size VHS tape that went into the camera, so that's how long ago that's been. I think one of the last things that we saw there was going back out of town. Again, on the main drag, you wind and I'm remembering this all from memory, so you forgive me if I don't explain this correctly. But I know that you go around a mountain to which you can look down over the side of the hill and see what is a hang gliding school of some sort. There was a large. Immediately when we went up on the side of this mountain to work our way into town, we saw what looked like a crop circle, but it was actually a target for hang gliding.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the hang gliders in that general area. Going back beside of that, you'll go across, I think, a small bridge, and you come to a convenience store, which is right on the corner that faces that mountain. As we were leaving, which was, again, probably about 2 to 3 o'clock in the morning, we saw a very bright gold light at the upper left side of the mountain that was right across from this store. We immediately jumped in the truck, bolted up there at the... Well, I should say that the lady at the store, when we pointed it out to her, she was completely oblivious to it. Could care less. She's like, yeah, you can go up there, but you're not going to see anything. And she was right. When we got to what we thought was the exact spot on this mountain, there was nothing to be seen whatsoever. But again, coming back down the mountain, it was still there. So it had a strange, I don't know if you could call it a mirage-like quality to it, where apparently the closer you got, the less visible it was. But at any rate, on our way out of town, I passed along the road, and I was not about to stop because, frankly, the entire place largely creeps me out in a big way. I had not slept the night before because we slept literally in the back of the truck the night before. I didn't sleep a wink, so I was already pretty exhausted and very creeped out. Leaving the area, I passed on the right side of the road what seemed to be a large, maybe 6 to 8 foot tall ball of smoke. What was that? Or has that been seen before there? I mean, it seemed to have definite density as a spherical object, but it looked as if it was made of a grayish-white smoke. Ever hear of anything like that there?
Many times. On both sides of the Hudson. And
Okay.
sometimes, this so-called smoke is seen to take shape and form.
Has anyone gotten reasonably decent photographs of something like that, or even interacted with it or tried to interact with it?
Yeah, but it keeps its distance, and there is a photograph of somebody who took it. But see, the photograph shows something that's very brilliant, while the people who were watching it say that it was barely visible to their eye.
Right.
So, but in the image, it comes out very bright. So it's emitting light to electromagnetic radiation in an area where the human eye isn't sensitive. So whatever these things are, they can practically interact and be almost completely invisible to us.
What do you think the reason would be for? I would say the entire time that we were up there, the only time someone said something to us about get out of here, don't hang around, was when we pulled up next to the Jewish cemetery. We immediately had, I guess, the town police officer stop and say, "What are you guys doing?" We let him know what we were doing. We related to him that we had no permission to investigate anywhere in the field, and we were not exiting the vehicle under any circumstances on Searsville Road. But he seemed acutely aware that we were not supposed to be around the Jewish cemetery. Now, I know that there's been a lot of very strange things seen around that general concentrated area. I know one of the things that was mentioned in Ellen Crystal's book was red lightning of some kind of sort shooting up out of the ground around there. I know that that's been reported by other people in that general area that I've spoken with. For anybody out there who doesn't put a great deal of stock in Ellen's work, that has been reported by other people. Is there anything that you've done work-wise in that cemetery that would say that there's a much higher magnetic anomaly area around that general vicinity?
Well, there is. I mean, there's pockets of intense magnetic anomalies in that particular area. Yes, there is. And I was down there a good number of times on Searsville Road, and unfortunately, I didn't have any experiences or see anything. But when I was down there a number of times, there were large groups of people just gathering around. So I can see why the local constable is getting a little upset.
Sure.
I mean, over on the west, over on the east, the east side of the Hudson, around the towns of Carmel and so on, when the UFO is being spotted, there's an area on Route 301 which crosses across the reservoir causeway, and it has a very open view, and for night after night, hundreds of people would just line up on that causeway and just watch the skies until 2-3 o'clock in the morning. And after a while, the police just had to come and start breaking them up and patrol the area. So the same thing happened really over in Pine Bush in those particular areas. The local police were alerted that there's the people hanging out there, and they should be careful watch them as to what's going on. But there's also military presence there, and the military presence may have had some authority or effect on the decisions of the local police to make sure people are not in particular areas.
I'm sure you're aware. I mean, in recent years, has Searsville Road not been closed to general public? In that you cannot go sit beside the road in that general area anymore. That road is largely closed now. Am I right?
Well, it is restricted, but it was open at one time.
Sure. Yeah, we were all over that road that night.
Yeah, if you remember, you go down the road. If you park your car, there are like open fields to the right, which separate, and there's been a lot of like Bigfoot-like creature sightings in that particular area. And when I was down there, it was completely open, and you can go from one end of Searsville to the other. But now I hear it's restricted and it's patrolled, so that if you go down there, there's no passage. You can't go through to go to the other side of the road without, getting a ticket or something like that if you're caught. But for some reason or another, yes, the local authorities, and probably with the influence of somebody else, restricted travel on that road.
Now, with, again, going back to Ellen Crystal's book, which was called Silent Invasion, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Have you examined any of her original photographs that she took?
Yeah.
Which do you find any of those particularly compelling?
I had arguments with her over her video material many times because, for the last part of her life, she used to live down in the Catskill area, and I spent some time with her down there. We went over her video stuff, and I tried to convince her that what she was, most of the stuff she was videotaping were C-5As landing at Stewart Airport. And she disagreed with me, of course, and got a little angry, and she was very defensive about some of the things she had. And I told her that they were planes that she has. And then she said to me, well, the UFOs can look like planes, so that's how they mask themselves. And I'm saying to myself, well, then what could you do about that? You're not going to argue with this person that what she videotaped was planes. But she had a couple of videos of something in the sky, something very strange, and I really couldn't explain that or as aircraft or any type of aircraft. And despite all of her hundreds of hours of video that she took, I think she did get a few minutes of some anomalous phenomena, yeah.
What about as far as her still photographs? I know that one in particular she claimed showed a bunch of non-human entities behind some sort of craft that was on the ground, and what looked like to me was some sort of small fireworks going off right around them, which she claimed were some sort of radioactive emissions of some kind, which was why they were showing up on film. She claimed at the time she saw absolutely nothing. But yeah. I'm sure, as you know, she claimed to get telepathic messages that she was supposed to shoot in this direction or that direction.
Right.
And I only bring her up, and I only bring Bruce Cornett up in the sense that I think largely on television, these are the two people you hear most often associated with, because I think a lot of the programs still being run are reruns from the old Sightings days. Bruce Cornett, when I interacted with him many, many years ago, was showing a lot of the same things, which were airplanes on approach. Right. Mm-hmm. And we had one very heated argument over, I believe it was video that he had shot, where I clearly did some image work on it and showed that it had a fuselage on the front and a delta tail fin and the whole bit. This was an airplane. And again, I got much the same response as you did. It was a very antagonistic argument and all of that. However, I don't doubt that Ellen and Bruce both had probably seen some sort of anomalous activity up there, because it seems to be so pervasive in that general area. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, what do you think of that kind? I guess how damaging is this sort of thing to the area when you get people like yourself who treat this with a large degree of critical thought, and then you have the other side of things, which doesn't seem to work that way? How damaging is that to the overall picture here?
Well, it is, because, as Dr. Hynek said once, there's a lot of people with crazy ideas and stuff like that, and unfortunately, much of the media isn't paying attention to the serious research that's being done in UFOs. The media has a field day with people who are doing this sort of thing, and it's always been a history of that. So it's damaging to the fact that it doesn't really give credibility to the topic of UFOs, And you're talking about, certain people like Ellen Crystal. I knew Ellen, and she was very sincere about what she was doing, mm-hmm. and that's good. But there are people who are out there who are not sincere about what they're doing in UFOs, but the fact is that there are many people who, they want to believe that they're getting telepathic messages. They want to believe that they have special connection that takes them out of this world. They want to believe that they've done something extraordinary rather than, most people to get attention. But overall, most of these people, like the late Ellen Crystal, they really want to believe too much. And I think when you want to believe too much, it gets in the way of objective research. And when I look into cases and go out to cases, I have no idea what I'm getting into. I just collect the facts and see where they're going to fall and come with a logical conclusion. And one of the conclusions after all these years I have is that the UFO phenomena is very real and it is very complex.
I think I should say that one of the reasons that my partner and I went up there was that we got permission actually to visit a home in the general area that a woman claimed that she was seeing out of her front window flashes of very bright white light on the left side of her driveway, and saw what she related to us as being small naked children running to a tree to the right side of her front lawn, and another bright white flash, and they were gone. Her husband and her were, I believe, I don't want to say elderly, but they were definitely up in years. And one of the things that she related to us was that she had small construction, the small orange, maybe 4-inch by 4-inch flags like they planted a construction site or a survey site along her front driveway. And 2 of those flags on adjacent sides of the driveway were blowing with absolutely no wind whatsoever in the area. They blew at a consistent rate. I saw these. I cupped them in my hands. Are you at all familiar with this? Does this ring a bell to you?
Well, I'm familiar with the sightings of the little children-like beings in that area. Some of them have been reported by quite a few residents in the Pine Bush, Ellenville area. And if you look at this from a historical point of view, these little creatures have been spotted in the hills in that particular area since the 1600s. And there, I even have some cases where these beings came right through the walls in the house and have taken these people. And numerous abduction cases where these little beings have walked in the house, but no UFOs have been spotted. These people have no conscious recollection after the beings came in through the closet area. It got so frequent with some of the people in the area that one particular family started lining up, pillows and couches near the closet entrance to slow down these creatures. But it didn't do it. I mean, the thing is that things were happening so much out there is that once a week people were meeting in like a town meeting sort of style down in Pine Bush, and just relating all of their experiences. And it got pretty incredible because both sides of the Hudson, the east and west side, were pretty hot that time with not only UFOs and alien abductions and close encounters of all kinds, but also other forms of paranormal phenomena which seem to have just, burst into the scene with the UFOs. And although it's slowed down considerably since that time, it seems to be picking up again.
It is picking up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for our listeners, I think I have to say that one of the things, and it's funny that you mentioned this about the people in town, I think the thing that kind of set me on end a little bit too much was that in Pine Bush during the daytime, this is a fairly interesting little, rock climbing, hang gliding community. It almost seems resort-like in a way, and that there's so many things to do up there related to hiking and nature and all of that. And fairly busy little place too. Mm-hmm. At nighttime, it's like Black Bart's coming to town.
Yeah, it's dead.
The window shades go down, the doors get locked, the lights on outside get turned down, and there is no one on the road.
People stay off the streets, and they stay off the thing. And also in Ellenville, which is close to Pine Bush, and that particular area, there are also underground tunnels, and no one has any idea who built them.
Is there anything in your travels that you've heard about these very mysterious wells that are dotted throughout that whole area?
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about those? Because that's something I've brought up, and no one has any idea what I'm talking about when I talk about the wells.
Yeah, well, there are enormous pits that are dug that are filled with water now, and from what I can figure, by studying them, they're on both sides of the Hudson Valley, east and west, over here in New York, and they're over in the Pine Bush area. Is that these are tunnels these are pits that connect with the tunnels, and they're filled with water now. And they could have been used at one time as ventilation shafts, but no one seems to know who built them. And I have seen this also in a number of different other states, like Georgia, Kentucky, Tennessee, where there's a great deal of spook light, globes of light that go up and down the highway, ghostly lights. They call them ghost lights, spook lights. I guess they call them UFOs now. But these are areas that also have pits like this, wells, as they're called, because they're filled with water. They're very old, and at one time some of them were probably used, it looked like, by colonials as wells to collect water. But the historical societies in the local areas have no idea on where these things come from.
Has there been anything said in colonial records about weird stuff in the area? I mean, you would think that of those people, if anyone, would have something to say about demons in the air and that witches and all that sort.
From the present day, going all the way back to the early 1700s and the late 1600s. There's numerous sightings, and back then, of course, they were associated with the supernatural, and today we're associating them with aliens. But people are basically witnessing the same thing. Now, if you look at the story of Rip Van Winkle, that took place in the Catskills, which is that particular area. I mean, it's based on a story that Washington Irving, heard about these little men who run through the hills and take people. And these stories, and the legend says that these men are actually the ghosts of the crew of Henry Hudson that are roaming the hills. And the story from there goes that Henry Hudson, when he came up and down the Hudson, his crew stopped around the area of Ellenville and along the Hudson there, and they came inland, and I think 18 or 20 of his men went into the hills and never came out, and one of them said they were taken by little men. So the legend says that the little men are up in the hills, and the ghosts of the crew of Henry Hudson is up there also. But you go right from that time until the present day, and you see stories of strange and unusual phenomena. My gosh, the Hudson Valley also is where the story of the Headless Horseman was born. I mean, so it's been an area of strange phenomena for a few centuries.
I mean, it's mind-blowing to me. And you say it's been quiet in recent years?
Yeah, it's been quiet, but it's picking up again. And it's picking up again with UFO sightings, and it's picking up again with other types of paranormal phenomena. And I think that within the next 2 years, we're going to see another explosive generation of a lot of this strange phenomena in that particular area, and over in Putnam County, which is on the west side of the Hudson. I see we're going to start seeing the Western East Hudson getting a lot of paranormal phenomena again, as well as a number of places around the world.
Now, do you see that? Because I notice I've been hearing a little bit about the same of Gulf Breeze. When I spoke to Bland Pugh down there some time ago in emails, he had mentioned it. I said, well, are there any sightings still going on in Gulf Breeze, and what are people seeing? And he says, well, there's still sightings here and there, but nothing like what it used to be. And I mentioned, did the crowd still gather at Shoreline Park? And he says, oh, no, they haven't done that for a very long time. People basically got tired of seeing the same thing and stopped going. And then when they stopped going, it stopped showing up. Do you think we're seeing sort of the same thing with the renewed interest in the paranormal and the UFO thing in general in recent years, that's why this is picking back up?
I think that it's reversed. I think because there is an increase now in the paranormal and UFO sightings, people are having more experiences and people are getting more interested.
Right. That's what I mean, yeah.
Yeah, normally, when a movie comes out about UFOs or the paranormal, people get interested in it because they see the movie or they see the television special or whatever. But all of these things on the media about the paranormal and UFOs, they came about because of the demand from the public who were having these experiences. So this time, the situation reversed. For example, last April, NBC Dateline did a whole show on UFOs. NBC doing show on UFOs, that was taboo for them for years. But they came out and did a show on UFOs. I was on it. Bruce Maccabee was on it. They did the 10 most perplexing UFO cases in history. Hudson Valley and Pine Bush was number 5. But you see, they did it because of the public interest. And the public interest is hot because people are having all of these experiences and people are looking for answers.
Well, I'm curious if you at all subscribe to the idea that I've had about this thing, and that the more attention that you seem to pay to it and the more devotion that you give to looking, then the more you seem to get from the other side of the table, which is recognition or manifestation, whatever you want to call it, of the phenomena itself. Have you seen that in your own work, going up there as much as you have and studying that area for as long as you have? Have you noticed that there seems to be that sort of symbiotic relation between attention and manifestations or viewing of the phenomena?
Yes, I've noticed that. And this is where I keep on talking to people about this connection, that this dimensional intelligence seems to need to connect with people. And once our minds are open, we seem to almost reestablish or help them establish a conduit into our reality. And I think it has a lot to do with the way people are thinking and their state of mind. And people are opening up to all this, and it's probably one of the reasons, but there are a few other reasons, why the phenomena is starting to generate again.
What do you think the other reasons are?
Well, the other reasons are because of the magnetic anomalies. And I believe, people in the past, researchers have been saying, you go to these areas where there's a lot of magnetism and so on, you get UFOs. Well, I took that into consideration, but I found just the opposite. I found that areas of negative magnetic anomalies seem to be points of the generation of the phenomena much more frequently. Now, these areas of magnetic anomalies are areas where the Earth's magnetic field actually loops over itself, and it's done that. It does that because of a number of reasons. The geology in the area, which is usually magnetite or iron ore, takes these magnetic lines of force and twists them around and braids them. But if you can imagine like a shoelace, okay? You wrap a shoelace around each other, 2 shoelaces. And when you do that, there's little openings between areas of the nodes where it crosses over. If you pull it tight, those little openings disappear. That would be an increase in the magnetic field. However, if you don't pull it tight, you have these little openings in there, and these are portals that open up to another dimension, not another universe, but another dimension. So what causes the fact? In these areas right there are negative magnetic anomalies, and it seems that magnetic fields have a tendency to close these portals open. But areas of negative magnetic anomalies tend to be areas where these portals can open up to this other reality, this other dimension in our physical universe that we can't see. And why is that happening right now? You know, the sun has a direct effect on the intensity and the shape of the Earth's magnetic field. Recently, the sun has been very quiet. Even though we're in a solar maximum, and that maximum is going to peak in the year 2012, we practically see no activity on the sun. And this is very strange, and it got a lot of astrophysicists who were up at MIT very concerned as to what's going on with our sun. But the thing is that this causes the Earth's magnetic field to develop these negative magnetic anomalies, which are associated, I believe, and I've showed it in some of my research, are associated with areas of paranormal phenomena. When we see a lot of activity on the sun in particular, we see an increase in the Earth's magnetic field, deflection of the Earth's magnetic field, these nodes close up, and we see practically no UFO activity. So do you think it's coincidental that the sun has been very quiet these number of years, and during this time period we have seen an increase in UFO sightings and the generation of a great amount of other types of paranormal phenomena? There is no coincidence. There is a connection.
I have to wonder, as you're saying this, because I think, well, at least for me, I can say that, I don't know, within the past, I'm going to say 3 to 4 months, my own experiences have seemed to ramped up pretty good. Definitely not what it's been, I'd say, in the past 10 years, because I had been, well, I don't want to say dormant, but I had been without significant experiences of my own in around 8, 9, 10 years. And I would say within the past, I'd say 3 to 4 months, that things have significantly changed for me in the way of visually seeing things and experiences in general.
Does Phil
and the
know
fact
you're an experiencer, or is this coming out of the blue?
I'm not sure if Phil does know or not. I'm just talking off the top of my head.
Surprise!
Yeah, shocker. But I'm very curious as to that now. If you're talking about some kind of correlation between, environmentals, then having an effect on us in some way, that I wonder if it could be, if I could go a little deeper than that and say, is it some sort of magnetic field that's being shot to the Earth that's actually changing everyone's perceptions a little bit and being able to realize what may be all around us all the time, if you get what I mean. Is you think that's a possibility at all?
Well, I think that's a possibility, and I think this is periodic in human history. You have to remember that 1,000 years ago, people, we heard of legends of strange creatures, little beings, they call them fairies, gnomes, elves, and so on, gargoyles, and so on. But, we read those stories today and we think they were just stories or myths or legends of, people who lived in the, in the Middle Ages. But the fact is, if you read these accounts, to these people, these creatures were very real. It's like it was part of their reality. Then these creatures disappear from human history and they're not seen. And then all of a sudden, we start seeing them again. And it's very possible that once again, we are being conditioned to accept this, and because our consciousness is changing, and that these creatures are going to be part of our reality once again. And, it's an incredible thing to think about.
Well, I mean, these things that you find out in the Hudson Valley area with these magnetic crypts, if you want to call them that, is there? I mean, obviously, you've documented that there's some very strange fields going on around those structures.
That's correct.
Is there an increase in experiences that people have, I would say, in the immediate vicinity of those structures as opposed to anywhere else, say a control area around the same place?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those areas, they mark the center of the paranormal activity. I mean, I've taken people out to these things, and I've had experiences out there myself. And, people have had numerous experiences around these things. So, these chambers, these stone chambers, they're sitting in areas of negative magnetic anomalies, and they're marking the center of paranormal activity in that particular area. And it's not a very large area because there's clusters of these structures, and it's not only having an experience that people see or hear or feel or touch. It's people going out there and having also these psychic experiences too. We're having visions and feeling these things that are coming from there and hearing voices. And there's a physiological effect also in these areas. For example, when you go in there, your blood pressure is lowered. But we documented it over and over again. When you go into these areas, and some of them, if you're having pain, you won't even tell them. People will say, my headache's gone, my back pain is gone. So there's a direct physiological effect on living creatures in this particular area. I mean, magnetic fields affect animals, and there's no reason to believe that they don't affect humans in some way. They may even alter our perception to allow us to view things that would normally be invisible to us.
Did you get my email about the Kogi by any chance? The Kogi tribe?
The Indian tribe, you
Yeah. Well, they're not Indian. They're the Colombian Kogi are coming to town and going up by the New Pulse area, going over, I guess, roughly, in that area where Strieber's cabin was and all of that. There, I believe, 7 elders are headed this way soon because they claim that they are in constant sort of meditative contact with the earth energies, and they've lost contact with a strand. And that's and they've pinpointed on a map where that is, and it just happens to be that area. So they're coming to, I guess, do their best to sort of heal that, whatever that means, to reform that connection. Does that surprise you that would be the place?
No, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, these were Native American magical spots also. I mean, it doesn't surprise me at all.
And I'd gotten an email from a listener asking if we could do some sort of coordinated, another go out there trip. We take a bus out there or whatever and show us around. Is that something that you do for money? Are you a tour guide out there?
Who, me?
Yeah. I mean, you've done it just out of the kindness of your heart for like me and some friends. But is that something that you would do for listeners if we wanted to organize something like that?
More than likely, yeah.
Okay. Cool.
I hear a live show coming.
Yeah. There you go. Because we still have to tackle Hawk Rock. I've still yet to see Hawk Rock, which I'm excited about. Is there a better time of year to do that? Or
well, not hunting season, that's for sure.
When's hunting season? Is it now?
No, it's I think late October and November.
Okay, so maybe we could get something going for before then. You think?
It's possible.
Okay. Cool.
I had spent the night out at Hawk Rock. We camped out there, a number of us.
Oh, you are a brave man.
Oh, let me tell you, it was a wild night.
I bet it was.
There's a ceremonial platform there, and talking about, the idea of shapeshifters and stuff, which are the legends from that particular area, where there's tricksters and shapeshifters that live there. And there were 8 of us camped out there, and I'll tell you, it was a wild night with all kinds of phenomenon. We, even got some of the sounds taped, almost like Bigfoot sightings out in the woods and sounds. And the thing is that we started out the evening, and I said, okay, everybody come together. We're going to have a little point of meditation here. And I was trying to get everybody in the mental frame of mind and so on and so on. And, and we were doing just a little meditation and talking, and as soon as we finished out in the woods, there was this sound. It sounded like a human being trying to imitate an animal, and then it slowly shifted into the form of an animal. And it shook a lot of people there. It scared them because it was loud. And at first they thought there was some kind of psycho out there with a chainsaw. But then we realized that, we were dealing with something that was not, part of it was responding to what we were doing, it seemed. And then that shook up quite a few people there, and we actually got that taped. And then during the night, there was these red globes of light out in the woods. And we're deep in the woods now, and it's pitch dark, and it's August of last year. And there was these red lights that kept on appearing like eyes, red eyes out in the woods, hundreds of them all over the place. They were disappearing, like they were appearing and disappearing. And what the heck is that? Then at 4 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, we're laying down, and there was a clearing above us. You could see up to the stars, and over us, the sky and the ground started getting the sky above us started getting really wavy, as if you're looking through infrared waves, but it was a solid cubical object, like with waves, but it was invisible. And it was passing over us, and we're watching it and saying, what the heck is that? Something enormous just passed over us, very slow, which was invisible, but was distorting the trees and the sky. And what I can think of, I'm thinking about the movie Predator when he's invisible, and but it was a very interesting night, and there were a few people there who were skeptics about the existence of unusual phenomena that left believers. And this is at Hawk Rock, which is a very magical place. It's the only place also, by the way, where there are prehistoric Native American petroglyphs carved into the rock, and they're like 6,000 years old. And Hawk Rock itself is an enormous rock. It's made of granite, and it's carved like a perching hawk. And there's no discussion as whether it looks like a hawk or not. It's an actual sculpture of this hawk that was done by primitive Native Americans, and it dates probably pre-Stonehenge. And this was magical ground, sacred ground to the Native American tribes, with the Algonquin, the Wappinger, the Iroquois, and so on. And today, it's a New York State watershed area, so anybody can go in there. And the amount of unusual phenomena that has been seen at this location is amazing. We went out there a number of times with photography and got globes of light and all kinds of things. So there's a lot of things happening out there. And once you get into that area, you can tell you're going into some sacred area because you can feel the anomaly. It's so strong. You say nothing to people, and all of a sudden people saying something has changed here. I say, yeah, we're about to go into sacred ground, and you could actually feel it. So there's a physiological effect as well as a psychic effect and a paranormal effect. So there's definitely something there. It's a doorway, a transition to another reality, and it's very active.
Phil, I got to ask this. We had Ted Phillips on about the Marley Woods case, which I'm sure you've heard and read about.
Right.
The balls of light that you've seen at this general area, does the light that they generate light up surrounding trees, the ground, or anything like that, or are they strictly contained in and of themselves? No reflected light at all?
No, they're not. They don't seem to reflect into the trees and onto the ground and so on. And sometimes the light is very faint to the human eye, but in certain types of film it comes out very, very bright. So I think for most of the part, a lot of these globes of light, whatever they are, they're around us most of the time, and we don't see them.
Curious. I don't know what to make of that. Ted related exactly the same thing, because he was saying that some of these lights come ridiculously close, and I think one of them even interacted with someone's car at some point and hit it. But I mentioned to him, I said, this has got to light up the fields, the ground, the trees. What kind of reflected light are we getting from these lights? And he said, there's none at all.
There is none. The only effect that I've had reports of people who had the lights buzz right by them, they felt as if there were like ants crawling up and down their back and their arms. Huh. So you get an exposure. There's some type of microwave radiation that would do that.
What has been your, if you don't mind sharing with us, what's been your most incredible experiences at these stone structures? You mentioned that you'd even had some experiences yourself at those.
Yeah, well, I've been out there and there are times where I think these places mark rifts in the space-time continuum or something. Now, I'm out there with, one other person, and on one occasion, there was a Celtic flute being played, and the sound was coming from everywhere, and we couldn't determine where the sound was coming from. But we're deep in the woods, and it was loud, and no one was around, and wherever you tried to go, it seemed to be coming from everywhere. And then slowly, after about 20 minutes, it just faded out and disappeared. And the experiences I had out in Hawk Rock, spending the night there, that was also part of it, my experiences out there. And also, on more than one occasion, going out to these areas, hearing strange sounds, which was able to record, and they sound a lot like a lot of these Bigfoot type sightings or sounds that people have taped. But also in these particular areas near the stone chambers, I was out there with a team of researchers, and we saw strange lights that dart around. In one particular place called Reservoir Road, one summer I was down there and looking for the mysterious spook light, and the darn thing appeared for me, and I photographed it in ultraviolet film, and it's blazing in ultraviolet film. So I have had, sightings and experiences out in these locations myself, and that's usually very rare for a researcher. But if you go out there long enough, so many times, and you're out there all the time, and these areas are very hot, sooner or later you're going to see something and experience something. It's just a matter of, the odds. But it seems that recently, the more I go out there, the more strange phenomena that I see. For example, recently we were taping for some type of show that's going to be, it's called Paranormal Television Network. I don't know what they're doing. Anyway, we're at Ninna Mountain, which has a stone chamber. Ninna Mountain has a lot of strange legends of UFO activity, ghosts, and things like that. I had some interesting experiences there. But while we were taping, and remember, we're out in the boondocks, in the wilderness, there were Native American Indian drums appeared playing. And the cameraman and everybody else is looking at everybody, where the heck is that coming from? And the last time I heard those drums there was in 1992. But then we were there again in 2009, and the Native American drums appeared again. So this is the type of phenomena that is quite common in these areas. And it's filled with all kinds of unusual going-ons. And, people who go out in that area, I think there's about a 50% chance that you're going to see something or photograph something.
Well, let me ask you, you must have asked the Native American peoples for their sort of lore about what these lights are. What do they say they are?
They say they're earth spirits. They're spirits who come from the other spirit world, and that in Minna Mountain in particular, they're called spirits of the mountain, the guardians of the mountain, because it was sacred ground during the 1700s for the Wappinger tribe up there. So they also have legends about who built the stone chambers. And so, you know, the legends, the sightings of these lights and strange occurrences go back to Native American folklore. It was seen in colonial days, and it's being seen today. Each particular time period where people are giving it a different particular name to identify it that's something suitable for the culture at the time. They're no longer spirits, they're being called UFOs. And now ghosts, because ghosts are hot because of the TV shows.
Well, I mean, I have no good guesses for what the hell is going on up there. I mean, I guess the only thing that I can relate to you that coming out of that place when I did was utter relief at the time. One of the very last things that had happened up there was we had driven all day long up and down Searsville Road, and there was a parting of the trees that led back to a small meadow and a hill. All day long we saw cows there, all day long, and milk cows, I guess. And at night, we drove back down that same road many times, and as we were coming back up towards the McDonald's, up towards the main drag again, my research partner said, stop the car, stop the truck, and we stopped. And off to the right, he rolled down the window, and we just listened. We didn't hear anything. We didn't see anything. But the only thing that I can tell you is that there's a feeling of being watched, and then there's a feeling of being watched by a couple of hundred people. And that's what it felt like. It felt like there were throngs of people standing out there in this darkness that we couldn't make out, that didn't want us around. Mm-hmm. And that's when we pretty much left the area. I can tell you that my research partner, and he was my research partner from pretty much the time that I discovered of what was going on with me. For many years, we investigated a lot of different cases and went on a lot of different investigations on our own. And he came over the house one day and said, I'm going up to Pine Bush. I'm going to camp out. And I don't know where he camped out, but I can tell you that when he came back, he was finished. We did no more investigations. In fact, we pretty much ceased having contact at that point. The only thing that he related to me was that he was asleep in his tent, and he heard a tone, I believe, of some sort. And there was a lot of light. And then he was subjected to a panoramic vision, just like you've mentioned here. You've talked about people having visions, quote unquote, up there. He saw what he said were like TV screens, and they were 360 around his head. And I said, what was on them? And he said, everything. He said, I'm done. I got the answer I came for, and I'm finished with it now. I'm done. And he, true to his word, he has not done anything else with it. So I think you can potentially have a life-changing experience up there, because I've seen people do that. But I have no good ideas for what that's all about. I think you're probably the guy who is closest to what I feel is right, which is the whole. You mentioned something about the time distortion or something like that. That certainly seems. That seems to set right in a lot of ways, like mirages that people are seeing in time. But then again, it ties in with what are these little people, and there's just so much going on up there. It's such a rich area for all sorts of things that I think the bottom line is we got to do a live show from up there, if any of our equipment will work, provided in that area. I'm not sure if you get that kind of disturbance in or around these stone structures, but I'd certainly like to go.
People are always amazed that all of a sudden their brand new batteries are dead.
Yeah. Well, that wouldn't be too good for the show.
You have to have enough backup,
Yeah. I mean, let me just ask you this for my own peace of mind: if we would go up there to one of these stone structures, how quickly can we get the hell out of there?
Depends on how fast you run.
Oh, okay. Good. I got pretty long legs. So at any rate, I think that's it for me, Jer.
Very good. Well, Phil, thank you very much for doing this. And
you're welcome.
Thank you.
It's so weird because, in about an hour and a half, it sounds like we really did a lot of show, but we actually have just sort of scratched the surface of your book, your work, and what else we could be going into. So we must have you back on.
Sure.
Yes, please come.
And, and definitely I will be in touch with you. I'm sure a few people will get in touch with me about wanting to go to Hawk Rock or something, and we'll try to work that out. So thank you very much for that as well.
Okay, Jeremy. Okay, Jeff. Have a good night.
You too.
Okay.
Take care.
Okay. Bye.
Hi, this is Ted Phillips, and you're listening to Paratopia.
Hi, this is Bill Burns from UFO Magazine and UFO Hunters. There are several ways that you can get UFO Magazine.
Yeah, we know, Bill. We know. Just shut up. Just give us one way. Don't tell us you're psychic and, give it 8,000 phone numbers and take 15 minutes of our time where we just want to hear the show. Just tell us how we can get UFO Magazine in one way.
Okay. Just go to www.ufomag.com, subscribe online. You happy?
Yeah, was that so hard?
Actually, harder than you know.
In 1951, a young boy in rural Georgia was visited and abducted by a group of alien visitors from an unknown dimension. That contact continued over several decades and resulted in the birth of more than 60 hybrid children. In one of the most remarkable stories in all of UFO lore, Love in an Alien Purgatory is the startling pictorial account of David Huggins' hidden life, as revealed in his own vivid and sometimes disturbing paintings. With commentary and text by UFO investigator Ferry Urdozu, David's story takes the reader into a world between two dimensions, a purgatory of hope, sex, fear, and ultimately, love. I don't know what any of that means. All I know is that David Huggins is a friend of Culture of Contact. His artwork is quite striking, and it is now all found in this volume called Love in an Alien Purgatory, The Life and Fantastic Art of David Huggins, now available at, Amazon.com. I'm guessing a bookstore near you. Love in an alien theta, living it up as I'm going down. That's right, Love in an Alien oh, whatever. Love in an Alien Purgatory. The title's unfortunate. The artwork isn't. Pick yourself up a copy today.
Eerie Radio, the endeavor for esoteric research and investigation into the enigmatic. Eerie Radio is a weekly podcast that features interviews with the world's leading paranormal researchers. Download episodes of Eerie Radio from your favorite podcatcher or directly from the show website at www.eerieradio.com. Eerie Radio. Listen, learn, laugh.
Well, I've been down the Mississippi, down through New Orleans. Yes, I have. I played in California. There ain't too much I haven't seen. Forever rambling, don't fool around with...
3, 2, 1. So the Jeffrey.
So the Jer.
That Phil Imbrogno, eh? There's so much that I wanted to get into, just in like specific cases, and he had investigated Gulf Breeze as well. I know that would have been great for you because that's your favorite. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah. Except I couldn't keep my mouth shut. It just kept pouring out of me.
No,
I'm sorry.
That was great. Well, I mean, it wouldn't have made any sense because I really wanted to do this story. and I didn't give it Smurf what you wanted to do. Oh, wait, no.
Oh, thanks.
Because essentially, we didn't discuss beforehand what we were going to talk to him about, but I had been really ripping through his book here and just knew sort of a storyline was unfolding that I really wanted to get to, which is the sort of the CIA, that he kind of knows these people and has had contact, and they don't really know what's going on as we think, but they do think about it in terms of interdimensional stuff more so than, exopolitical space aliens. And I thought it was completely interesting that Alan Hynek, of all people, who you, I think, generally associate with, as being the guy who first came up with swamp gas as an excuse and then said, oh, wait a minute, no, I was wrong. These UFOs represent something real, and then thought it was aliens. And I believe he even sort of argued with John Keel in his time, but then ultimately at the end of his days actually admitted that he thought John Keel was more right than wrong.
Yeah, he said towards the end that it was all about Windows. I mean, that was something that was what I took away from Hynek's work, was that he mentioned Windows and windows of opportunity or windows of, manifestations, that kind of thing. That's more or less what I take away from his work. And
I thought Phil Imbrogno just sort of knew about those stone chambers from living around there. I didn't realize that was all part of the studying the Hudson Valley UFOs, was, finding that where are they manifesting from? These places, these places have these stone chambers in them. That's weird. And all these chambers line up, and they all line up with the central point being that balanced rock area that I've spoken about on other shows, either this one or Culture of Contact, I don't remember. So all of that to me is like revelation. Like, that's all a very good sort of storyline, and I think it would have been superfluous to do the other stuff for this episode. And then I had, I remembered that you had been up there, but I had forgotten just how involved your thing was. And I think seeing those military people jump out of the helicopter, I think that goes a hell of a long way to explaining why people stay in their houses and all of that, even if it's a psychological, almost like the neocon color code system that came after 9/11. It's like, or orange alert, I think that kind of stuff gets into your psyche, along with living in a paranormal neighborhood. And, you stay home, you keep the lights off, and you don't talk to anybody. I think that's what...
Black Bart's coming to town. Yeah. I have to say that my research partner at the time, and I don't know how to say this in the clean... Well, let's say it this way. He had a lot more gumption and guts than I did at the time. And when we were driving down the street, he says, "That's a helicopter. That's a military helicopter. Pull over." And we pulled over, like, literally right next to this driveway. And when we pulled over, out come the rappelling ropes, and down come troops. I'm like, I think we should get the hell out of here. Mm-hmm. And he's like, get the camera. And we put the camera on it for a little while. And I don't remember who I wrote back then, but I emailed someone who was somehow involved in that area, and I don't remember if it may have been Phil, although I doubt it. But I wrote someone about that, and they said, "Well, you may have one of the only pieces of footage that exist of military presence in that area." I think I actually wrote someone to ask, "Is there a reservation up there where they're doing maneuvers like that?" Because this seemed to be on private land. Now, of course, you asked me where that tape is today. I have absolutely no clue. I would have to go through every VHS tape that I have to try and find it. But my research partner was with me, and I've been trying to get in contact with him lately just to see if by chance I made him a dub. But I'm telling you, it was the gambit. It was the weird feelings. It was the seeing a lemur on a fence post in upper New York. We didn't see a UFO per se. We didn't see the massive triangular ships that are so often reported. But we did see strange lights, and we did see a ball of smoke beside the road that seemed to be, the smoke seemed to be moving within it, just as if you might blow cigarette smoke into a soap bubble. You've seen people do that on the internet, doing tricks with that. It looked not too dissimilar from that. I just wasn't stopping the truck. I wanted to get the hell out of there. So very, very strange area. I mean, I liken that only to a place like Gulf Breeze and the level of strangeness that seems to surround the place. And on one hand, I look at it and I say, is it because I've read so much about it? Is it because I've watched so much about it on television? And, you know, I didn't even realize we were in Pine Bush when Phil mentions talking about people having weird feelings going to certain places. I immediately knew we were in that area. I said, we're in Pine Bush right now, aren't we? He's like, yeah, that's where we're at right now. The sign was right back there. You can tell. And I literally watched that town close down. I mean, the only thing that doesn't shut its doors is McDonald's. Can I get some fries with that? That doesn't stop, but everything else, including... I wonder if the
aliens go in there or whatever these things, the red-eyed creatures, if they ever just wander into a McDonald's, like order a Happy Meal or something.
I want a Happy Meal? Oh, can I have the under 3 toy as well?
Why can't I have a McGriddle?
Right.
It's past 11 a.m., sir.
Right.
McGriddle.
You know, oddly enough, McDonald's being the only thing that doesn't seem to close its doors, we actually talked to some of the girls working in McDonald's and got some interesting stories out of them about the stuff in the area. And, you know, they related, the one girl was relating in detail a story about the wells, which is why I brought it up to Phil, about these wells and her, something about her boyfriend throwing a shoe down one of those. And supposedly from the town folk lore, it was bad luck to mess with the wells or to throw anything down them. And as I remember, something horrible ended up happening to her boyfriend that she was going out with at the time, and she immediately attributed it to this well. But she also said that there were times where the kids basically would go out to the woods to drink, not like any, not unlike any suburban town in America. And parts of this are pretty suburbanite looking, but it's surrounded by a vast amount of wilderness. But anyway, they were all standing around this well one night when all of a sudden she said it felt like a instant 30-mile-an-hour hot wind erupted out of this well. What is that all about? I mean, what really is going on? Because there's all of these. There's the military thing. There's the tribal spirits. There's lights. There's UFOs. There's balls of smoke. There's little people walking around in the woods. It's like it's got everything going on. It's all sorts of madness. So it's definitely a weird place. I mean, if we do a show from up there, you know, expect me to be a little antsy.
Where it depends. Sure.
Yeah, where it depends. Definitely. I encourage all listeners who attend. Where it depends.
Well, we should probably leave it there because we are once again a ridiculously long and interesting show. But I gotta say, man alive, do we have some incredible guests. They just keep coming at us. I mean, pretty much everyone we've ever wanted to have on the show, we're going to have on the show. Pretty much September and October, and then we're done with the show, right? Isn't that it? Isn't that how that works?
Maybe you are.
Oh, then we've completely peaked.
I'm enjoying this way too much. I mean, I don't think that that's going to be a peak point. I think that, and I'm not giving any allusions to who's coming on soon, but I think people are going to be really shocked, and surprised and happy too at what's coming up. And God, I can't wait. I cannot wait for any of these. But no, I don't think we're done after that, because I think once we get through this next throng of people, I think it's time to have a serious roundtable with some of our listeners. Mm-hmm. And I think that we should all kind of step back and take stock of exactly what's happened with the show and who we've had on. And I know that we've got some listeners that would like to be a part of that. So I think within the next couple of episodes, maybe we'll put a post up for people to write in and volunteer for that. Guys, we do this for you. We do it for us, but we do it for you too. So you guys who want to come on and talk with us about everybody that we've had on and address or pose any questions, we'd love to do that at some point in the not too distant future. What's coming up is going to be the Mark Nesbitt Live at Gettysburg show, which will be taped.
Live. Pre-recorded.
On tape. Right. But it will be somewhat interactive because much like we do from my home every night, we'll be running a live camera. If we can get on the net there, I'm not sure we can, but if we can, I'd very much like to have a live cam going that people can kind of peek in. But I have to write Mark about what day is good, and then we have to work our schedules, Jeremy and I, to be able to go.
You know what's ridiculous is how much free we give to the people. I mean, come on. None of these other shows are giving you the free.
Donate to Paratopia at our www.paratopia.net.
I mean, hell, do it. Yeah, that'd be great. But I'm not even saying that. I'm just saying, man,
we're cool.
I almost wish I were a listener of the show because I'd be like, wow, this is great. They keep doing new things and not charging money for them. That's crazy.
This is the sound of Jeremy pat himself on the back.
Yeah, it's all I've got is me at this point, and Jeff, since we don't make money.
Right. So the Gettysburg thing, I'm really looking forward to, actually. And we're going to have an opportunity for the listeners to go through all of the raw data, which we're going to put up at a spot that they can download it themselves and see what they can pick through and find.
Wait a second. Getting back to the money thing, somebody did donate money. Is that somebody that we should be thanking on the air, or is that an anonymous thing?
It was not anonymous. Allow me to open my Gmail and find out.
Who did a couple of weeks ago. Somebody actually unsolicited sent us money.
Yeah, we got actually an unsolicited donation, and I don't want to say his whole name, but Ivan, you know who you are. Ivan deserves a special thank you for sending us some money to keep the show going, and Ivan paid for this month of broadcasting. So thanks, Ivan, for your help. And that was a humbling experience, looking into my email and seeing that Ivan had donated some money to help the show, and that's really great. I think we're doing okay. I guess at some point we'll have T-shirts or something like that. I've been working on that because I hate asking for donations. I'd rather be able to give something back for funds that we get. But yeah, we're doing okay. I mean, we don't have a huge archive. We archived another 2 shows this past week, which I have to give to Jeremy to put up on the Culture Contact archive for Paratopia, so that anybody who wants to familiarize themselves with episodes 1 through whatever we're at right now can do that, because those are their first episodes are rapidly dropping off of iTunes. But here's a new thing. We got a new chat room, which you can find on our homepage now in the Pages section rather than the Links section. And the number 2 bit of news is that we are going to be moving the website, which will now contain the message board, the podcast, which you can listen to live or you can subscribe, and just like you do right now. And we're also going to have host blogs, which we're trying to toss around. Do we want to do video blogs, or do we want to do written blogs, or do we want to do both? So we might have an ability to do whatever we want with this site, but it'll be a whole new site, lots of features, and the chat room. And I don't know that we're going to do that much with the chat room, except we are trying to make this show so that we can broadcast it live on the net as we record it, and that way you, the audience, can be chiming in on the message board with questions that you'd like to hear asked of our guests, so you can kind of be actively involved. At that point, bingo bango, there's your way to interact. So we're working on all these things that hopefully will be done within the next month, I'm hoping. So that's the changes coming up. Other than that, I got nothing.
See you next week. One last time, we'd like to thank Phil Imbrogno. Please, please, please go find his book at a bookstore near you, Interdimensional Universe. It's fantastic. It is worth your time, your money, and your eyesight.